This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, with that, I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. All members are in person and we are recording. The first item on the agenda is public speak. Is there anyone that would like to speak to anything that is not on the agenda?
On the agenda. I mean,
This is for things that aren't on the agenda.
okay.
So you'll get a chance.
Okay.
All right. Moving right along to public hearings. First one is Wait the Dead Donuts site plan approval. Property located at 1 Northampton Street. Is there someone here to speak to that? Please come right up, name and address. Let us know what you're planning on doing.
Hi there, my name is Steve Colacelli and I live at 21 Federal Street here in Easthampton. And basically what we'd like to do is, along with my partner here, Tim DeGennaro, we are co-founders and owners of Wait the Dead Donuts, a local donut business that's been based here in town for 4 years. So far, we've been just operating under a tent. We'd like to expand to a food truck. And we like to place that food truck at 1 Northampton Street outside of what will now be called the FIT building. The Head of Culture Collective is taking over the first floor there. And so they actually asked us to kind of bring some food to this new enlivened, rehab space. And so that's what we're trying to do. Went through the whole process and says we need site plan approval. We are a bakery, so we think that we should be able to get the site plan approval. Basically, we're going to put the food truck out in front of the front entrance. If you can picture, this is the old massage school building there, on a grassy lot in front of the front entrance. It won't be on the actual parking lot. And we're going to just, it's going to be very similar to the grill, which is the food truck or trailer that's a couple of blocks down the road on Pleasant Street. We'll be open probably like 4 days a week, at least to get started. Mornings doing breakfast, hot donuts, hot coffee, and bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches, breakfast sandwiches. And that's basically what we're planning to do.
All right, and some of this is in your materials, but just to go over it. So it sounds like you're going to be mostly doing your waste disposal and a lot of the stuff with your building operation.
So currently, as operating under a tent or a mobile food, which would be the same in the city of Easthampton, if we, as a food truck, is you have to have a base of operations, which is a certified, inspected kitchen, and ours is the Bombex, which is the old Congregational Church in Florence. So we will continue to use that space to do all of our prep. We do baking there, or we will be doing baking there, dishwashing, disposal of all of our grease, water, and trash.
And then trash on site, I think you said you're going to use the existing dumpsters that are going to be used there on site.
Yeah, we're going to have a relationship with the buildings in terms of that, yes.
Questions from the board?
So you said a food truck with a motor, like that?
It's going to be, so we've already identified and put a deposit down on it's a converted old bus, short bus.
Okay. So
it is mobile, but our intention is to leave it there for pretty much, it might be brought out from time to time for maintenance or for the special occasions, but for the most part, we're hoping to just keep it there. Much again, like the grill, which is down the street, just like a central location.
Because I saw at the Cultural Chaos, you had like a wagon almost, like, I don't know what it didn't have a motor on it or anything. I mean, you had your equipment on it, but, so it's not going to be that.
No, we just had tables like Cultural Chaos.
Yeah.
Understand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Can you just confirm those hours of operation for me? And when are you opening specifically?
So far we've done at the site under our tent, we've done a couple of pop-ups and trying to pin down exactly when we'd want to do. We've identified breakfast as being our strong time, and we've tried 8 to noon. And I think that's pretty much the hours. We might go a little bit early to 7, no earlier than that, and maybe we'd stay open till 1. But that's what we're looking at. Now, thick part of the whole idea of them inviting us to bring food there is they're going to eventually want to have music there at night, and they wanted us to come and do some of those events. So that's something that we would like to also be open to do, more on a special, maybe not a regular thing, a case by case basis, like an event by event basis.
So typically we include hours and days of operation in the site plan approval, like in the permit. And so I never want to have it be like too tight for what you guys want to do. And also if it's going to be bigger, then we can at least be thinking about that too. So like, it sounds like, I mean, I wouldn't want to limit it to certain days for you, but maybe it's like 7 to 2 and then the ability to do night events on site as well. I mean, more or less what you're thinking.
That's pretty much what we're thinking. We, in terms of night, if this is a concern, I don't think we'd ever be open past 10 p.m. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're expecting.
Which days of operation? Do you have ideas which days you'd be?
So, especially if we're shooting for 4 days a week, I think it would be Thursday through Sunday.
I would be inclined to not limit it to days in the decision.
No, I know. I just want to know for my own belly.
And I appreciate that. That's kind of, where we're trying to, be good neighbors and meet the community where it is. As a company that has scaled up slowly from, operating off of a pickup truck and a tent, like we are all about starting with a small footprint and then growing. And if that means coming back to this board to kind of like expand something, that's fine too.
And if you are, I think it says this in here too, that if you were there in the evenings, there's already existing lighting, right? You don't need to supplement or add.
Precisely, yeah. Where we're gonna be, there are already 3 existing street lamps that illuminate the area.
And you're getting your electricity from TIC as well, is that right?
Yep, so we're working with them and an electrician to actually be able to plug directly into the building's power, so there will be no generators.
And what about water and wastewater? You say you're going to dispose of your gray water back in Florence?
Yes, exactly. So so we're gonna fill up our tanks in Florence and then exchange them there too. Yeah.
Here?
Why don't we just make a regular business hours? Was it 8 to midnight, something like that? What's a regular business hours?
Definition of what they are.
I think that's anyway in the morning going to be that.
Oh, I think 7 seems totally reasonable.
7 to 10 seems reasonable, and make it
Well, just in case they
7 days a week, and if they want to be at 4 or 3, they can be 3.
Yeah, I mean, I think that alters any of the situations for what we're doing. You can set their home.
I'm just a little, I honestly don't know how to respond to this, but there's part of the operations in another city, in which some of the waste is going. Are they a part of the process as well? I mean, you're moving it here, but when you set up there where you are currently, is there a process with the city, and are they at all with this?
Oh, I mean, so the Bombex they're well aware in Northampton that it is a base of operations for not just us, but for other food trucks. And food trucks operate not only around Massachusetts, but all around New England, and they come back and dispose of their waste and do all their prep there. It gets inspected twice a year, just like every restaurant. Those reports are all public, and I can share them with you. Yeah, no, so I think it's kind of part of our base of operation agreement with them that we will be bringing back, like it's spelled out correctly, bringing back our waste and dispose of there.
It's sort of similar like restaurants that have food trucks that they use.
The commissary kitchen is the term.
Any other questions from the board?
Sure. One thing I just wanted to Mr. Chair, I'm concerned the board, on the sheet where where it says where it's going to be operating, that is a grass area, that's a lawn. Is there any issues with parking a trailer? Because my understanding, I wasn't sure exactly what the size of the trailer is. If that's going to be a concern, parking it on non-impervious surface.
I don't think it matters if it's grass, when the only considerations we have are things like wetlands and tree removal and things like that. My recollection from the site is it's basically a cleared grass lawn at this point, right?
There was some parts of it was paved in old pavement,
Yeah.
and I do believe there is some discussion about having it redone. So if that is a consideration, we could also have the pad for the truck being paved. That's something we can do. But, yeah, it is a grassy part.
I don't think it matters to us. I mean, I think it might make it nicer for you and your customers, but I'm not sure that that's.
Thinking of Captain Jack's, I really didn't have a paved area, really, did it? Next to fire ants?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a old parking lot.
Yeah, it was
But,
actually right.
but yeah, I don't think that, as long as it's not sort of like tree removal and it's not like there's any waste or anything like that that's been left. Any comments or questions from members of the public?
Kelly Wisinski, Overlook Drive. Sort of a related comment. I don't remember seeing anywhere the THCC project being reviewed either by any of the boards. Did I miss something?
It certainly hasn't come to us.
That was, zoning board of appeals.
Yeah,
It was a ZBA thing or is going to be?
It was approved, let's see, back in either January or February. It came to us at the end of last year.
Okay, thank you.
And one last, just for the record, right, so you're gonna be able to use the full parking lot at Thick, right? Normally that'll be.
Yes,
Customers will pull in from.
exactly, yep.
43 spaces, it looks like.
Yep, and then we anticipate if and when we are there to serve the guests at a concert or an event at Thick, that it won't be people coming in for our donuts. We will be there for the people that are already there. So parking shouldn't be that much of an issue.
No.
Yeah, man.
I love your donuts.
I love donuts.
All right, any other comments or questions? Is anybody online?
If anybody is online and would like to speak, go ahead and use the raise hand function. I will give you the ability to speak.
Sorry, Dan, I cut you off.
Seeing nothing. There's just one thing I guess I wanted clarification on, just so it's not a question I have to bring to you folks later. I guess if it makes more sense to operate, rather than on that grassy lawn, say on the pavement, is that something the board would need to review, or that's something that the applicant would just be able to do as perhaps
I mean, I think if they're taking up the parking lot where they're taking up spaces, they probably would need to come back somewhere else. I don't think that would be an issue.
so if it's operating, anywhere else within the parking lot, it would require a
Do you think
the
it
board.
affects the decision that the zoning board of appeals had on the number of parking spaces that they had?
Well, it's also part of our decision here, right? Is that, I mean, first of all, we grant permits or site plan, it's based on the plans and applications, or based on this location. I think there's not a whole lot of other places you could move it or going into the parking lot, but I don't think that would be an issue. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like technically if you're gonna move that off that grassy section, I think there's probably something to be pointed out.
Okay, so that would require reopening of the site plan. Okay, wonderful. I just want clarity on that. If that question comes up later.
Any other questions?
It's straightforward. I motion to approve the site plan approval, for Wakeford Dead.
Seconded.
Voting for site plan approval for Wake the Dead Donuts. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. All right. Awesome. Congratulations. Good luck.
Head out.
And moving right along, we have a continued public hearing for a special permit for Kevin Perry, for the property located at 35 Pleasant Street.
Easier for me to do this from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be,
It's easier for
can do
you.
it, that would be easier. If we're all involved.
Just sign in.
If you go to easthamptonma.gov/planning board, the link is going to be right at the top. I can also email that to you if that's easier.
Well, I got it's not logged in, maybe I could.
Oh,
Oh, got it. You're trying to get in through that computer.
Easier if I just use my own.
Yeah, probably. Save you a lot of sign-ins down the road.
While this is reading up. Again, Jeff Squire from Berkshire Design Group. I think he's in the area from Norwich Properties, owner and developer of the project. Pull up more. Okay. So yes, we have a few updates to share with you tonight. Some are site related. Some are, I guess, just a recap of the site visit. I don't know whether there's any questions or how you want to handle that discussion, but regardless. So again, project site, 35 Pleasant Street. It's the site of the former Roman Catholic Church. There's a school, Roots Day Preschool Daycare, operates out of the building that you see in the rear of the building, and one of the other buildings, the lower right. The existing site is roughly 10 acres. This is the developed portion which sits up the front. You can see, again, the developed portion of the site is really just this front portion. And so so this is the plan as it exists now. And as we've talked about, we did look at and had the corners of the building staked in the field. So both planning board and conservation, because they were interested in the same, could see those locations. We've had a site visit with them also, and followed up with the hearing last night, and just followed up with some information. We need to provide them with some additional information. Most of it relates to stormwater. City engineer Diana just gotten back from vacation, provided some initial comments. We've reached out to her to clarify some of that, but that's where stormwater and conservation sits. Some of what we, pending the outcome of this tonight's meeting, we may have some other updates to provide them, but we'll work through that with them in anticipation of the 30th. With respect to the site plan, the few updates are just in discussions with the fire chief, opened up these radii a little bit. Doesn't really affect the layout of the site much. Just that it opened up those radii enough to accommodate their vehicles a little bit more. And then we did, in response to the request to look at additional parking opportunities, we had looked at the potential for parallel parking and one-way, travel. It just turned into a much bigger headache given emergency traffic and the reality of people, at one end of the street, going all the way around and coming out. So that wasn't a logical solution. In this plan, we were able to pick up an additional 9 spaces. So there's 4 spaces here. There's an additional 3 spaces here. So that puts, at least, again, pending the conversation or clarification about the garages as parking space, this provides an additional 10 spaces beyond what's required. And just my
Spaces, isn't that 7?
7 is, it's not that big.
Oh, I'm sorry.
4 and 3?
We've got 84 spaces are required, and we've got 94 spaces on this plan with those additional 9. That was just an update from the previous plan.
Still only see 7 that are circled in red, but
Was one,
but
there's,
then the-
there's 1, 2, I'm sorry. Okay, so 9,
but the total is 94.
94. Yes. Sorry. Maybe my description.
No, 43 units in total.
42 units, 42 units. Yep. And I guess in just thinking about this in larger context and driving around, you know, the places in downtown Northampton and Easthampton, you know, there are a number of neighborhoods that have, you know, tight residential neighborhoods with, you know, houses close to the street, short driveways, and, you know, there's on-street parking for overflow, but they're just as limited as these folks might be during, you know, it's living in these locations, these places limits what you can do for social functions. And I think that's just the way this is. It's the way a lot of those other neighborhoods operate. So, you know, we do have some additional space. There are, you know, some on-street parking opportunities, you know, in proximity. But, you know, I think with the garages, the additional space in the driveway, the reality that not all of these will have 2 cars, you know, it feels like there's been some balance between, you know, what's, you know, what's required and what's practical for a project of this size.
And remind me again, the 94 includes the garage spots, is that right?
So that's really the big updates to the site plan itself. We are providing, there were discussions with, you know, conservation, I know yourselves in the field, particularly just about how the construction sequencing is going to work. So we're working, we're providing some plans to the Conservation Commission that delineate that a little bit more succinctly. You know, in a nutshell, the, you know, phase 1 and 2, phase 1 will be this southern part of this eastern part of the site, or western part of the site, I'm sorry, and include the renovation of the church building. And so the reality is that, you know, the project boundary will really is going to be between the church and that garage building that exists, you know, in that upper corner. Fortunately, this driveway, the existing pavement that is there, works out pretty well with respect to, you know, the future site plan. So the idea is going to be that all this drive will remain in place to get around the church and provide access to the building. What's not needed beyond that roadway on the outskirts of that, where those future, you know, townhomes will all be removed. That site work can get built, but this will be, you know, much more stable, you know, erosion-proof site with all that, with the existing asphalt. We can protect the existing catch basins, and the drainage system will remain intact. This portion of the site, you know, this phase 1, all of this porous asphalt will get installed, you know, the last phase of that portion of construction. And then a similar thing would happen for phases 3 and 4.
I'm curious about the porous asphalt, just because I don't think this board anyways has dealt with that before. And so I get the concept of it, but what happens as far as like filtration? I mean, the you know, stuff that's in the road and all of that, does that just?
So yeah, so the interesting thing about porous, and one of the real advantages of it are, and the primary difference is really the base course. And so it's about the same thickness of asphalt, 4 inches or so. It's a much different mix in that it doesn't have all the fines. And so that's, you know, what, you know, makes the, you know, traditional asphalt, you know, more solid. And so this just has some voids in it. It's the same asphalt mix or the same bituminous mix. It just has a, you know, larger, you know, overall, granular, you know, component.
The challenge with it is in the Northeast, when there's snow and they sand and salt it, that sand gets into
It's the sand and sediment that you want to keep out of it.
So there's no maintenance component to it?
Yes, so there's no sanding. Salt, especially with the spray-on products, generally fine. That washes through. From a stormwater perspective, there's a much deeper profile underneath it that's primarily composed of loose aggregate. And so it's, you know, very similar to sort of a traditional subsurface detention system, which is a big fabric wrapped, you know, thing filled with stone. And so this is just under the road base. And as you get near the top,
so that deals with the things like the motor oil or whatever, sort of the general stuff.
Yeah, and the very
on the road that would be just coming off the roots or whatever.
And the very top of that, the base course layer is a finer, you know, granular mix, so that traps a lot of the sediment. So from a stormwater perspective, it achieves or exceeds the water quality requirements. So this, you know, from a water quality perspective, works well because it meets or exceeds the state requirements. And then from a detention or attenuation perspective, there's this giant reservoir beneath that asphalt that you can use as your detention system.
So one of the things we talked about last time was looking at a draft of sort of like documents setting up the HOA and sort of, so we could look at sort of ongoing, is that coming yet or not? Yeah.
We haven't received anything yet, so we need to provide that. I don't know whether that can be a condition, but we've got an annual maintenance plan included with a stormwater report that requires annual vacuuming. No salts. It specifies, and this is really the big stormwater component on here. So it's that that annual program is pretty specific. And that's part of the stormwater permit, that's part of the Conservation Commission permit, and that, those permits will certainly end up in the HOA's, requirements.
They've seen that, the Concom has that material.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, just know if I can speak to that for one.
Sure.
We're a considerable ways away from having HOA docs, mainly because of the existing church building. So there's a lot to be worked out to kind of have that tied to this. It'll be challenging because of common areas and basements and things of the church. The HOA is more complex than, say, if it was just the new construction piece.
Yeah, so I think what we've done in the past is maybe craft conditions about what the HOA documents will have to say, and then I think have it submitted. I think we've even done it administratively for some sort of approval by the planning department, or maybe the town council, to make sure it complies with sort of what we have as conditions. Because I think in addition to sort of just, it's always different, right? Because if we just give a permit to one individual, the obligation runs with them. But in theory, if things go well, you will someday not be involved in this project anymore. It'll be full of residents, and they will be the ones that have to be on the hook to sort of maintain plannings, do the, maintenance and replacement and all that. So I think that's probably how we would structure it, because you're right. There's no point in having, you're not going to sign and record anything.
Yeah,
so that's not useful, but we can probably structure it that way if that's where we're headed.
Yep, we can make that work. Thank you.
And then, Mr. Chair, if I can interject for a moment.
Yeah.
Just so that way folks who might be watching online and so it's on the recording, would you be able to connect to the meeting and then continue presenting so that way it's showing both online and in person?
Yes. Good call.
While he's doing that, I think I have some history with porous pavement, and so I'm concerned about it. So if we're gonna be crafting conditions, maybe I don't know what our jurisdiction is to specify how many times a year it gets cleaned, how many times a year it gets evaluated to make sure that it's working properly, and what we could require in there, because it's not just an annual vacuum. It's at least twice a year, oftentimes more. You have to do a lot of studies to make sure it's still working properly. The exfiltration is working as it's supposed to. So
yeah, and I think also wanting to make sure there's an obligation, I think somebody spoke at the last meeting about replacing it with similar or better quality, right? So you're not, in 10 years replacing regular pavement. I think procedurally and sort of jurisdictionally, we historically have deferred to the Concom on the stormwater, which I think will likely address a lot of this before we do anything. But perhaps if that doesn't include enough to make us comfortable, I mean, we have our own jurisdiction over the stormwater plan and all stormwater issues.
Yep.
So if we get that from, I mean, I don't foresee us taking a vote on this until we have the stormwater plan from, and then we get. Before we figure out if we need to craft our own conditions, because I do think that, I mean, again, we've never done this before as board.
Yeah.
And, I mean, ideally, Concom, which lives a little more in that world, will have suitable conditions that will cover everything, but I totally agree. And I don't want to lose sight of that, because I think that's one of the unknowns here, at least for me.
Yep, I completely agree, and I'd like to add that it definitely needs to be something well stated in the HOA, because that's where the maintenance occurs.
Right.
And if the homeowners aren't doing it, then they're in trouble.
They're in trouble,
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
But we're also in trouble because then the stormwater's not draining properly on site, and then it could go out into the street. There's concerns there.
Yeah.
So
And because we haven't done it before, I'm very curious of, what the difference is in cost to maintain and life of it. I think we had someone speak publicly in the last meeting saying that they degrade much more rapidly. They require replacement much more rapidly. And that there was a comment I have no evidence to this effect.
Yeah, they can, because if you're plowing, there's voids, you're hitting gravel, you're hitting, so it's popping up, like little bits are popping up, so there is potential that, it's gonna need more maintenance.
Comment I think that was made was something along the lines of other communities not liking it. Now that's anecdotal to be sure, but it causes me some hesitation.
Well,
It's really popular in the South, where you don't do salting and sanding and plowing, and it's very effective. It can be very effective in the right situation.
My guess it was a comment that's very excited about for what the towns want. But I don't think I will here for local roads. Right where you're backpack the distance, like maybe on a smaller site like this, just like this.
It's maintained and assessed.
There was something stated, and you may not have finished your presentation, so I hesitate.
I mean, I've got more to share, but
You talked about the fact that it was it didn't work out in the plans as far as the one-way road because I think you brought up emergency vehicles and possibly one of the things. I wondered if you could give me some details. What specifically didn't work? What were the triggers that prevented that flow that could lead to some side street parking? What were the exact reasons that did?
The primary issue was so along this radius was one, there's limited places to get parallel parking. It doesn't make, there's not enough space between these driveways. So it's these sort of open stretches of curb that would be the primary place to look. So we looked at this curve. There was a couple of spaces that you could fit here, and then there were a couple of additional spaces that you fit in here. And the challenge was fire requires, emergency access requires 20 feet. And so even by bumping in the road a few feet and trying to keep enough separation for these spaces, an emergency vehicle didn't have enough space to make this turn. And then similarly, even if they hugged this northern edge, couldn't round this corner because the vehicle's sticking out in the swing distance. And so it just didn't lose at least 2 or 3, 4 of those spaces. And at that point, it just didn't make any sense. Still
Silver bullet last one.
That's
good.
That makes sense to me. So thank you for that information.
Absolutely. So then just in, other internal DPW discussions, the utility plan will change insofar as the number of connections to the buildings. They charge per connection. There's a way to do this much simpler with, one connection, one water, one sanitary connection in the building, seeing the way that these will be broken up. And so that'll be controlled internally. And so that'll be an internal thing that we're working through with DPW. And then lastly, I guess I would just offer the updates to the traffic. So I had one of our senior civil engineers who was the former city engineer for Northampton, take another stab at this, look at some other information. There were a couple of things just to note. One, my math was slightly off on the original church estimates, and we can talk about those numbers in a minute. But then the other piece was looking at the existing daycare center. And in addition to looking at it by square footage, there's also an ability through the ITP standards, the same standards that I referenced, to look at it with actual students. And so we plugged that into the numbers. We did recognize that the church has been closed for several years, but with that, if you look at the daily trips for the existing daycare center, based on the number of students, it's weekdays 450. With this development, and the other thing I'll note is my original calculation, 42 or 44 units. So this corrects that to the correct number of units, so it's slightly less, but nevertheless, the average weekly daily trips are 307, which is less than just with the existing daycare center, even excluding the church. So those numbers go down. It does go up on a weekday or a weekend, obviously, just because the child care center isn't working in full capacity. I would note, and we made mention of this also, that it's odd that I don't know whether I highlighted this, but it's certainly in there, that the ITE estimates use 8 trips per 8 trips per unit on a weekend, which seemed really high and an odd number for a residential unit on a weekend that you generate 8 trips. So that's what we used. But it's just to make note that that seemed like an exceedingly high estimate. And so it may be, using that number, this may even be more inflated than it is. So certainly possible, but it seemed like an odd number. Also looked at existing traffic. We did dig up some data that was done in 2024 between Berkeley Street and Terrace View. So we were able to take those average yearly trips for Pleasant Street, and this projected number of traffic volumes for this site are just a 4% increase overall on the traffic for Pleasant Street. This is where it makes, its entire estimates assumes that each dwelling unit makes an average of over 8 trips for arrivals and departures on a Saturday. So that's just where that, but this still accounts for that 4%, increase. And so that was also included. We did look at site distances and driveway distances based on AASHTO requirements. And so just, there's more than, what's existing in either direction for more than 500 feet, both more than accommodate the required site distances. And then we just anecdotally added some crash data that we were able to also dig up in that research. And so this, again, isn't real recent, goes back to 21, but during that period, there was only one report, one crash report, just to add that into the mix. And so, I think those were the major updates. And I don't know if there are any questions or comments. I know there were.
Can you repeat who did it? Who helped?
So that was one of our senior civil engineers, but he was the former city engineer from Northampton.
He's part of your team now?
Yes.
Okay, so it's really just
still internal, but it was a much thorough, sort of more qualified review. And again, a civil engineer is certainly capable of producing a traffic analysis.
Give me some hesitation. What I'm really looking for is sort of a third-party validation. It doesn't have to be a full, and for me, site traffic study, but I was really looking for third-party validation. In company, it's kind of, there's inherent bias there. I'm not saying that anyone is behaving biasly. I don't mean to imply that at all, but I'm saying that it calls into question that no outside source is kind of examining.
Sure, and all I would offer is that these are pretty, they're going to reference these same standards and plug in the same numbers. These are all based on, the
problem I have with it is that you're coming at it with the 8 trips looks high. It looks low to me. Now, that's again anecdotal. So, but my feeling on this is that it's just, I'm not where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, because there's a sentence here that you say, noting that the church has been closed for several years, a comparison between only the childcare use and the projected traffic yields a decrease in traffic under the weekday scenario. How?
Well, that's what I was just presenting before. So
450 for the daycare and 307 for family. I don't think there's any way you can argue that the church is really part of the math on this.
No. So, but excluding, so just with the current student population at that child care center, 110 kids, it generates 450 trips.
Okay. And then
it's got 84 on the weekends, and the proposed project has 600.
Right. Yeah. So if yes, we clarified the church numbers, but we exclude them for the purpose of that discussion.
Yeah, this is not my specialty. I don't know.
No, but I think one of these classic ones where, if you think about 600 added trips on a weekend, that's a lot. If you think about 600 trips going on to Pleasant Street, sounds like that's 4% of what the traffic is. So it's this, we deal with this on all these major roadways, right?
Yeah.
The last one of the game, but it also means we still have to consider traffic impacts on the community.
Yep. And when it was a church, I'm sure it was a very busy church, so there was traffic there.
Yeah.
It's just things have changed now in the city.
Lots of other uses you can have there too, similarly impact traffic.
Yep. Yep.
Any other questions from board members this time? All right, comments or questions from the public?
Oh, I have more questions. Sorry, we haven't got the landscaping plan. I had a question there.
Oh, sure, let's do that.
So you have a table in this landscaping plan, and I haven't seen this until now, so I did a quick check. 2 of your species are not native to Massachusetts, so I'm wondering if you've had anyone check that to see if these are native. These are not all native plants to Massachusetts.
Which two are you?
The dwarf Photherlia and the Virginia sweetspire. They're not native.
And which one?
They're the Virginia sweetspire are not native to Massachusetts.
They certainly are regionally, they are on native lists in a number of communities. But I can
You could
provide
check
a
that.
list with.
I mean, I'm trusting the internet, but but please do check it.
Sure, yeah. And I know conservation has been involved in the same conversation with protective plants, so I can, yeah.
As long as conservation's reviewing it and checking it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I don't know why. Yeah, those aren't on, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to, bring attention to that back fall off on that property.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think when the church was there was probably no concern, but people living there, especially with a bunch of kids running around, there's gonna be a definite problem with somebody going over the back side of that thing. I think something should be put from one side to the other. It may be a real pain, but I think something should be put there, some kind of barrier or rope or some kind of a thing that would let everybody know that drops out that far. If you're gonna have kids playing around, you can go right down that bank. That's pretty steep back there.
Yeah, there's no plan for fencing on that backside, right?
No. No. It's
Right,
not.
especially when you take down that building that's got the actual erosion right behind it. That's going to be a concern, I would think.
Where the new little parking lot would be in the middle, yeah.
I mean, the intent is to plant behind that and provide a, similar buffer.
I think you need something more than a buffer. You can plant all the trees you want, and people can still get between them. I don't know if you need a fence or you need something to go from
You
one
need a
side to
sign.
the other. You need something.
There's a fence there now, right?
No.
No, only for part of it. Oh, the far side.
There's a chain link back here for
Yeah.
part of it, yeah.
Well, wasn't there a fence on the right-hand side of that property in the back where the kids were playing?
Yes, on the
Oh,
right
and-
hand side.
In this back corner,
Just
yes.
that last little bit there. The rest of it was open.
Would it be possible to run something like that from one side to the other, or would that be a real hindrance? Or what?
I mean, there's a number of concerns. I mean, maintenance and just the practicality of actually even doing that is not insignificant. We're just, looking at a lot of the other properties along the same corridor.
Yeah.
That's,
They're not back in front of us right now, though.
No, I understand that. No, I understand that. And
Not Stepler, but it was the other.
It was,
one.
Big
Was
drop
Stepler?
off in the
Yeah,
back. Yeah,
and
I was thinking.
I don't,
Not Stepler, the other one though. We had
But it
a,
was way in the back. You had a hike.
no, we specify a rope or a sign there?
It was like Stepler 2. It's the same builder.
We had
Oh,
something
was
there
that
they
second
installed.
one?
The
Yeah.
second one.
yeah.
It was a loud bell.
I wasn't on that one.
Oh, that's right.
Loud bell.
Even if you ran a cable from one side to the other, it would at least be a hindrance. You know what I mean? There's something there.
Something
I think
crazy.
Stepler 2 came up with signs, just putting up signs, danger,
I'm curious that, that 9, 10, 11 building felt really close to me. I'm not in this business, but like, how do you handle that? I mean, the other building, it feels like there's quite a bit of space there, but like, what are the plans for sort of how you handle that slope for both erosion and, safety?
I mean, the structural engineers and architects and us have looked at, what the existing grades are relative to what's needed for footing and, looked at that proximity to the slope and where that, breakout is, and everybody is comfortable at the
I mean, I
moment.
realize you guys want this to be able to build there too, so.
I'm sorry, yeah, Kevin, you can.
For that particular foundation, or all of them, actually really only can over excavate by about 3 feet. So, it's not like we're removing that bank, putting it back, and then you have virgin soils that or new soils that may erode. So the bank stabilization's been there for years. We won't disturb that. So where that pin was, you saw you're more out by the arborvitaes. We're only going to be digging, like I said, about 3 feet past that in that area. And then it'll be restored. It actually, becomes part of the lawn. So the big thing is in that time when the foundation's open to ensure there's no destabilization of the bank. The only area that really shows any erosion over time is where the culvert is.
Yeah.
With the washout. So, yeah, we've looked at that. Our structural engineer's been out there a considerable amount, and test bits have been done. And the other thing that helps is there's great soils there. So, yeah, we don't really have any concerns in that area. As far as the drop off, I would suggest if we could perhaps signage through there that's in the woods, it's just something along the lines of, dangerous embankment, be careful. Because I think anything else is going to pose a multitude of problems. I think fencing is the biggest concern. I don't know how physically you install that, how you get leaves that are going to get, I mean, it creates but signage to make sure that people are aware that they're not walking there and see something that's an easy fix. We can do that, no problem.
I think we did that with stuff.
Yeah. Any other questions from the board?
Only a comment from the site visit.
Yep.
There was a resident that came to the last meeting that was stating that the new driveway was going to be impacting his front of his house into his road, into his window, into his house. And I believe we confirmed out on the site that the way that road is oriented, unless it has changed.
Actually, you can see that building. Yeah, you can see that building.
It's directly across from another condominium complex, and it's the end of that building which has no windows on it. So yeah, so that actually is a good location for that street. It should not impact resident. So that's the only other observation. Thank you.
Members of the public, please name and address and let us know what you're thinking.
Hi, my name's Peg Considine, and I live on Prospect Street. I moved to Easthampton a year ago, and I chose Prospect Street because it's a lovely, quiet neighborhood. And the church feels like it's part of the whole aesthetic beauty of the neighborhood. So it's very sad to hear that, the church was sold and so forth. I heard that the architects were planning on, or even the diocese has something about maintaining the facade of the church if you buy it. I don't know if that's true. I would like to know what the plan is for maintaining the facade, how much of it's going to be maintained. I know it's going to be 9 townhouses in there or something, 8 or 9 townhouses. I just feel like it would be a tremendous loss of a sense of history and place to lose that. I have a couple of other things.
Yeah, why don't you do your list and then we'll let them back up.
Okay, all right. The next, and I did write to the architect asking about the plan because I looked at the aerial view, and of course I can't see the facade, but what's going to remain. Second is the parking overflow, and I see that some of that was addressed, and it is a concern because it's a quiet street with lots of kids, bicycles, people walking. There's already a lot of people parking on the street because there's a lot of rentals on Prospect Street, like many streets in Easthampton. And so it's pretty maxed out, I believe, for safety and aesthetic and just the feel of the street to increase any of that. And I did hear you mention, well, that happens to a lot of streets in Northampton. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes, but I don't think it should just be the way it goes, like maybe forfeit a couple of units for parking. And third, when the construction begins, I'm concerned about big trucks cutting through. When Union Street was finishing, that's when I moved in, they were just finishing Union Street. There were big cement trucks cutting through all the time. And I thought, oh, well, it'll be finished soon. But then when I heard about this coming, I don't know how long it's going to take. And again, it would be a safety thing, and it would just kind of not be a welcome, to use it as a cut through rather than going around the rotary. I would prefer that traffic was diverted from Prospect. So those are my 3 concerns.
All right. Kevin, you want to?
Thank you.
So for the facade for the church, speaking specifically to the gable end, which you see, there's virtually no changes to that. So we've done a couple projects in the past, and I think one example is the Parsons Street School. If you're familiar with that, it's worth driving by. We had since sold that, but it's Parsons Place. You'll see we even kept the doors. So what looks like the facade before the doors, it's actually a bedroom. They don't operate. Something similar will be happening here. Facade remains virtually untouched other than being improved. The only other changes to the exterior, the windows will grow by about a foot on the left and right side. The stained glass, primarily, most of it was taken out by the diocese themselves. So the windows really aren't usable at this point. They'll be replaced with something that looks historically similar, a historic window, but it won't be in keeping with looks like we've done other projects, and they do need to get a little bit taller because of the 2 stories. But I think by and large, when you drive by, it's not going to look markedly different. I mean, we're trying to go out of our way to actually save the church. Ideally, the best use of the property for us actually is to not have that there, but that's not something we're interested in doing. There'll be a couple entries cut into the sides. Most of it will use existing doors. I believe there's 2 instances. It looks like they will cut in new doors. They'll get a set of stairs out, but that's the church will remain as is. As far as parking, I think Jeff addressed that. I understand the difference there, but I think every unit is going to be deeded essentially 2 spots. So either one in the garage and one in front of it. Those are deeded. Those are yours. That's to use as you please. The church units, depending on the size, but it looks like right now those will all also get 2 deeded spots for them to use, and it still leaves guest spaces, as Jeff pointed out, that exceeds what's required. So I understand in a perfect world there'd be ample parking, but that also becomes an aesthetic thing where you have these big parking lots and things. So I think we found a happy medium. We were able to exceed the count. And I understand also for traffic and things. I know that that's a concern, and we'll look into the traffic studies. Looking for the independent one if that's a requirement. But again, from a practical standpoint, I feel like we're a pretty low impact project. I think having another church or organization purchase that and now utilize that to have what used to be 300, 400 parishioners in their weddings on weekends, services during the week. Who knows what gets used in the school? This particular project's much lower impact, and also if this was affordable housing, the density that would have been allowed would have been 3 to 4 times this in terms of units. If another, particularly a nonprofit, something like that came in and chose to take the affordable housing route, for us that doesn't make sense. That's not the type of developments we do. But that would be, again, considerable more impact. So we feel, given the acreage of the site, the size, adding just over 40 families to the property is probably one of the lowest impacts you can have on that particular parcel. As for the construction, I don't know that there's a way that we can tell people to stay off Prospect, but I don't think that given this project, that's going to be a desirable route for anyone. I think most of them are going to be coming down from Maine, Pleasant. I think you saw probably a lot of guessing, but probably a lot of the Union traffic was just due to the street closures and the overall. My office on the Button Building, and I can tell you that was an interesting couple of years. I mean, so I feel your pain, and I think myself included went down Prospect Street to try to avoid parts of that. I don't think you're going to get that. That's kind of a narrow, twisty street for us to be driving triaxles and the subs. But I don't think you'll see the impact that you saw in Union.
With respect to the preservation of the church, there was a letter that came in, I think last week, about the chimneys and about the birds that nest there.
That's my letter, yeah.
Any evidence of this, or what are the plans for those chimneys? Any thoughts on that part?
That remains. So they're not used. They're going to stay. We have no plans to touch them whatsoever. Like I said, the facade, the work to the facade, in fact, the entire exterior is limited to improving the bell tower. We will keep looking the same, but it will either get painted or reworked. We have to do some work there. In fact, that will more than likely become a unit inside the bell tower. So that's kind of a neat feature. And then other than that, it's really the windows and doors. But the chimneys stay. You'll get a new roof that matches the existing. All the brick remains. Any historic details, the water table,
Will it
things like
remain
that.
uncapped?
I'm sorry.
Will it remain uncapped?
Yes, yeah, there's no plan to change that. And all of that ties into, oddly enough, the HOAs, because it's complicated. So for example, we're going to develop 80% of the bell tower will probably go to a unit. There's still going to be some areas that will have common access to that HOA, not for residents necessarily, but for service, maintenance, things like that. The basement is not getting developed. However, there's anywhere from a 10-foot to a 5.5-foot basement area that's down there. It's very accessible. That has to get somehow turned over to the HOA. So it's complex. Phase 1 is really going to be limited to these first 11 units. And as soon as that's designed, permitted, and ready to go, we start construction, we'll wrap up the design on the church. So it'll be kind of a phase 1A is with the church itself. But there's a lot of work to do there in the next 12 months before units are sold in phase 1 and there's actually HOAs.
I have a question a little bit further. I did research on this. It was a fascinating letter. I can't wait to hear you come up and talk. But I learned that they're a federally protected species, but there are a lot of homeowners, a lot of folks enjoy them, the insects, but a lot of homeowners don't like the noise. It can be an intolerable noise to live with in your home, and that you can only remove them at the right time. There's a certain time, I forget exactly what it was, a season you're allowed to come in basically after they leave, because you're basically either gone or young cook left, and a lot of people at that point will cap them. And so you have no plans to change this, but there's an HOA that's going to come in later, and if you've got enough people inside there who are complaining about the noises, you know, it may be something that they decide to do, which could change things dramatically. So we have an opportunity as the board here to stipulate what changes may or may not be allowed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to put a condition of success going to come back, but I also think the noise stuff typically is inside residences. These large chimneys like that, like it's really good to test out with that. They can certainly it's a little flat. They say like that's you can cap it all. Come back and explain that slide.
I was going to say, I would be hesitant to say something like it could never be done because I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't want to say something that could be 35 years from now.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't say you can't, but I would be fine saying you can't cap those chimneys or remove any of them, whatever, like that kind of aspect.
We have no intentions of touching that. The masonry is in great shape. There's no reason to mess with this.
Any other comments? Coming back up, there's people online can only do it for testing. Thousands of years. He feels it might be excellent.
I think this is a continuation of the.
It's just a detail. Do the spires remain? I know the cross would come out, the spires remain. Or the steeples.
Yes, and anything that's religious in nature would come in, which essentially there's very little left. That's the process. We take it, but anything that is religious in nature will come down. There's a little bit more detail into the school as part of other phases. When that building comes down as part of the demolition, substantial interest in some of the anywhere from religious to just sentimental things that were offered to folks before that gets done.
All right, Dylan, let's jump to online comments, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Michael T. It's a request to allow Michael T to participate. All right, Michael, should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
I can, thank you. And thanks for getting the project up online. It was hard to see online for the first part of the meeting. The plans weren't available. So I had a few points I want to raise. I live on Prospect Street as well. I've lived here for over 20 years. And at the first meeting, my understanding was it was unclear if there would be any affordable housing units. From what I just understood from what was just said, there won't be any affordable housing units. As a long-term resident of Easthampton, I feel like, is there any way to include affordable housing units? We need more affordable housing, not just more housing in Easthampton. The second point I wanted to raise was about the traffic comparisons. I feel like even with the sort of updated information, the claim that there'll be less traffic seems inaccurate. The church has been closed since 2010, not just several years. when the church was open, a lot of people walked to the church, so the traffic wasn't a huge impact in the neighborhood because it was a neighborhood church. The residential units are going to create daily peak hour traffic in a much different way that doesn't reflect the sort of that the IT study they mentioned is for I think for a different kind of residential neighborhood. There's been no actual traffic data for Pleasant Street, is what I understand. It's changed a lot in the 25 years I've lived here. The developments at Tasty Top and Ferry Street are only going to increase the congestion along Pleasant Street and shift more traffic to Pleasant Street. There's no assessment in any of this, as far as I can tell, about pedestrian, bicycle, walkability impacts of adding, I guess now 42 units. My neighbor who spoke earlier, I'm also concerned about construction disruption and parking pressure. It seems like a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of noise, a lot of dust. If there were some sort of mitigation plans for construction impacts, that seems like they should be required before permits are issued. The other 2 points I'd like to raise are that 42 units on such a small lot seems a little out of scale with the sort of historic and residential nature of this neighborhood. My understanding of the Easthampton zoning rules suggests that they protect neighborhood character as part of what the planning board's supposed to be doing, from noise, traffic, and overdevelopment. I'm curious at what point a project like this begins to impinge on things like noise, traffic, and overdevelopment. A sort of procedural concern I had is that a lot of people in this neighborhood do rent, and my understanding is that renters don't get abutters notices. So a lot of the people I spoke with in the neighborhood weren't notified of this project because I believe it only goes to homeowners, not to renters. So it seems like, all the residents in this neighborhood will be affected, and there should be some way for them to be included in the process. And the last thing I want to say, just to sort of underline what's been said, I really feel like an independent traffic study, not someone who's working for the current company, that with real data and cumulative impact analysis of what's going on here, would before the permits are issued, would be really useful, along with construction phase mitigation, and to pause the approval until some of these issues have been addressed. That's all I have to say. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I don't think there was much in the way of new questions there, but maybe you can clarify on the affordable. I think you just said there was not going to be any affordable, but.
No, there's really no matrix to do a mix, honestly. I think you guys are familiar with that, but for those who won't, it's typically one or the other. This is essentially market rate, and these are not for rent. Is also the big difference. If it was affordable and subsidized in other manners for the construction costs, that would be a different story. But these are going to be townhomes, even in the church. Nothing's for rent, all individually, all through the HOA, and it's all market rate.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions?
Abby Wazinski, Buffalo Drive. I've got a couple of questions, and maybe when you come up, you can bring up a picture of what the townhouses will look like from the front. I have to say, in looking at the project, this project, in terms of the buildings that are being proposed, is much nicer than any of the other ones that we've seen proposed recently. These buildings at least stay within a home type of building, as opposed to others that have been industrial style buildings proposed. So I want to say that these look nice. People that are concerned about the character of the community, I will point out that the zoning changes that are being recommended would remove the concept of character of the community from the zoning regulations. So if you're concerned about that, I would pay attention to those potential changes. So I did want to say that this development is certainly less dense than anything else that we've seen proposed recently. So that's a positive. A couple of things I'm concerned about, certainly the traffic, and I would ask that an independent traffic study be done. And looking at Pleasant Street, I think, as many people have previously said, it is not being done in a nutshell. It's not the only thing that's being developed over there. I mean, we've got another building just around the corner at 1 Main Street that's being, or 1 Northampton Street that's being developed. Ferry Street's adding more units. And so I think the traffic impact it can't be looked at solely by itself. It needs to be looked at with an understanding of the actual traffic on Pleasant Street, with potentially some projections as to what's going to change in the next 6 months to a year, just so that everybody can understand that piece. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that back slope and whether it really is strong enough. I would hate to have those people buying those units and, 8-10 years down the road, it starts to destabilize. It's great that they've looked at it and had an engineer look at it. It would be great to have some assurance that from an independent look. In terms of the porous asphalt, I think there's still some great debate about whether that is an appropriate use in New England. I think there's quite a bit of debate in the engineering community and the water community. The Conservation Commission is debating it, whether it's a good option or not. They're looking at pulling in a specialist in the porous asphalt because they're unclear about that. This project is in part over the secondary recharge area for our aquifer. So it's important to understand how the salts and everything going through would impact our aquifer. Even though it's a secondary recharge area, it still is a protected secondary recharge area, and it's important to remember that. So I think understanding that if, down the road, given how different the wear and tear on porous asphalt is, it's going to need to be replaced more frequently. It is more expensive to replace. Will the HOA be able to continue to maintain such a high level of asphalt? And it seems like the stormwater plan is dependent on the porous asphalt. And so if the HOA decides later that they can't afford to keep putting in this porous asphalt as frequently as it needs to be replaced, the stormwater plan doesn't work at all. So I think those are all important considerations. So I would like to see the a frontal view of those units. They are, again, a lot nicer than anything that has been proposed for other buildings in the area. So I would like to thank the developer for trying to do something that looked nice as opposed to industrial buildings.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep.
Hey, my name is Robert Parker. I'm the resident you're thinking of over at 22 Pleasant Street. I actually think you have the wrong house identified because mine is the really ugly brown one that has all the windows in the front. So the front of my house actually faces the expanded curb cut that you guys are proposing, specifically the crabapple tree that's there right now that's going to be taken out. So specifically all the headlights will be heading directly into my windows and affecting my lot value. So it is something that I would like to do.
When we were out there, we looked at where the new curb cut will be, and it comes out right across from the side of that other building.
It's like a green, it's like a perpendicular to the road.
Yep.
So it's got a barn roof on it. There's like 5 or 6 units in it, parallel.
Yeah, one of the apartment buildings.
Directly across the way is the curb cut.
I mean, not that turning cars won't splash everybody with headlights, but like those cars that are coming right out of that new curb cut are going into a concrete wall on the
So
other
you're
side.
saying this curb cut that we're proposing isn't expanding the one that's already there? They're making a new.
correct.
It's moving it. Yeah, it's a
physically
not really even near.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, you can see,
You can sort of see at the bottom of the picture on the screen there.
Yeah.
Where the new driveway comes out or will come
you
out.
can see that when you pull out, this is the apartment building.
That's not me.
Yeah.
I'm 22 Pleasant Street, so I'm directly facing your parking lot. So that is the curb cut that I'm referring to. That's currently on the left side.
Oh, it's, on the left.
So it's
side.
the
You
existing.
guys are on the opposite side of the road from me. So yeah, I'm to the left of Prospect Street on the opposite side of Easthampton Electrical. So when they talk about expanding that curb cut, which is currently a one-way exit, it will be directly impacting my residents.
So that curb cut shifts to the west a few feet, but it's pretty much the same location.
No, that's on there.
Yeah.
Okay, I have some previously prepared notes, which I do want to go through, but
Yeah,
one of the
please.
things I just want to bring up really briefly is that the only thing not being discussed in this conversation, like we talked about that one-way possibility that was brought up previously, the only thing that is never brought up is the possibility of losing a unit or two. And I understand why. I understand economics. I'm grateful for you guys. We need more housing in this city. I wish there was some affordable housing, but we need more housing. And I agree, the buildings are really beautiful. I would love to see a side view of them because the majority of what you'll see from the streets will be side views of your new units. So that is something that I'm particularly worried about is how much shingles I'll be looking at. But that's just me personally. I would love to see that side view. I'm really grateful for everything you guys are doing, but I do think some of the proposals that would increase everybody's quality of life in terms of neighborhood parking and all that kind of stuff have been addressed previously. And the only reason that they've gone away is because, logistically, things are too tight on this building here or this building here. And I think it's not, this is the planning board. We should plan. And if we need to plan to open things up a little bit, I hear you on density not being overly high here. To me, compared to what's there currently, it's potentially overly dense. So I know that's a matter of perspective, but specifically when it comes to parking and the things I'm about to talk through, it's something that I would like us to be aware of. And the other thing I want to bring up is that I hear the design group specifically about talking about, this is just a reality, how like you're going to have guests come and park on Prospect Street and Pleasant Street and in the Easthampton Electrical lot and in the ESP lot. Like that's just, I believe you said the reality of people. And that's very true. But I want us all to also understand that there's a privilege to saying that, and that is that you guys are on the only side of the street with no street parking on it. So when you talk about sight lines and all that kind of stuff, you're not considering the issues we have as neighbors. You're just considering like checking off the boxes on the internal studies. And I don't say that aggressively. I'm just saying something for us all to watch out for. So in terms of my hastily written letter, the first thing everybody's talked about is so far traffic. I really do think there should be an independent study. At the last meeting, several people, including myself, raised concerns about traffic and requested a proper traffic study. The revised submission that was posted today, it's still just desk research from estimates. And as predicted, the estimates are starting to show a traffic increase like we predicted last meeting. I don't understand why there's so much pushback on a site study. They're looking at the amounts that were actually represented in the revised report. Looking at Saturdays, that's a 695% increase if you're going by the daycare like you guys recommend. If you're looking at Sundays, that's a 544% increase. I hear you guys on saying that 8 round trips or 8 trips total for a residential space on a weekend sounds low. I personally don't think it is, but I drive tandem every morning, so that might be the problem. The other thing for me that doesn't, if we're going to bring up numbers that don't totally make sense, I'm not sure where that 450 weekday trips for 110 preschoolers come from, unless they're driving a lot of Fisher Price cars and we're measuring those. Like that's a lot of trips, more than one drop off and one pickup. That's an additional set of drop offs and pickups. And I personally live right there, so I can watch the parking lot. I can only watch the west entrance. Informal study the other day, I counted 131 daily trips on a Tuesday, which is far below the 450 that we're using. So I just want to underscore, let's do an independent actual study of things. I did appreciate you guys pulled Massachusetts numbers. That was really helpful. For me, it solidified my standing on things. I'm sure you're totally shocked. But you put in that report that the street has an average speed of 34 miles per hour. And it was kind of worded in a way to make us think that that's slow, but it's almost twice the posted speed limit is right there. So I just want to underscore that it's a fast moving street, and the trucks and things moving down that street are all people getting to the industrial park who are late for a meeting. You know what I mean? It's scary traffic. So somebody brought up pedestrian safety before. It's something that I think we just need to really prepare for. That Prospect Street intersection, I want to call out again, not on your side of the street, on the opposite side, there is on-street parking and you often cannot see around it. It's something to be aware of, and I want us to be really mindful since we're planning. And also, while I'm thankful that there's only been one accident in 3 years, I'm not sure that totally reflects all the close calls that I feel, all the honking horns that I hear. Trying to look around that traffic is really challenging. I totally understand that you're thinking right now, why are you bringing up the Prospect Street exit? Because that's on the opposite side of our lot. But adding, all of the entrances and exits to the current plot of land are one way, and that gives you predictability. You know where people could be coming from. So the reason I really liked the earlier thought that we had about having a one-way entrance on the western edge, one, took care of my headlight issue, but two, it adds predictability because all the cars will either be entering or exiting from the right side of the street, so you can kind of get into traffic a little bit safer. The other thing that I don't know how we can ever estimate, I know we talked about it previously, but the THC Pop development is going to be happening. That's not your fault. No one's fault, not fault, that's loaded, sorry. That is happening. There's a roundabout that will be built. You guys said earlier the reality of people. The reality there will be they will not be going that way. They'll be going down Pleasant Street and looking around because it will be a lot less construction. That's my guess. So even though we're going to look at traffic numbers and all that kind of stuff, just consider that there will be unknowns in the scenario, unknowns like Union Street, but unknowns that we just need to anticipate things being a little bit crazier. And you'll also be having construction here. So that's that. In terms of parking, I really appreciate that you guys looked at parking again. And that it increased from 3 to 10 or 9 or whatever the number is. I'm sorry. I tried to count. I'm not very good at counting space, apparently. The one thing I want to highlight, and I know you guys are saying, it's like we're doing the bare minimum and more, and that's really laudable, but it's just 0.3 guest spots per unit. And that doesn't totally reflect real needs unless you have any 0.3 friends or something like that. It's also totally not addressing what happens for Thanksgiving or the holidays. I get it. We can't make an entire giant parking lot the size of a Walmart parking lot right behind. But again, looking at the idea of can we move a unit? Can we move a second? Is there a way of being creative for planning this still? Is there a way to not just add a new line of parking spaces next to the previous line? Can we look at other ways of incorporating that parking? Especially because you guys are on the only side of the street that doesn't have any on-street parking on it whatsoever. So when there is overflow, and as you said, as people are people, it's going to be on Prospect Street, which is already really crowded, and renters who have already been identified as not totally having a voice in this process. So I really think it's not something that we can just brush off and say, this is how neighborhoods are. We're just going to overdevelop this and then make you guys deal with the parking. I don't think that's totally fair. I also don't mean to categorize this. The other thing that I had a question about is you guys are adding 10 spots, which puts you over 26 spots right there. And so I'm curious how you're going to account for any ADA access spaces, because even though if we add 10, wouldn't that remove some of those 10 spaces to make room for ADA? I think we need a van and a normal.
It's as a private development.
Okay, private development, so no accessibility concerns. Oh, okay. That's just, okay. But if there is adding parking, if there is added parking, is there additional screening and lighting? One thing for you guys added parking was, I noticed you just added a line down really close to the church. Being a neighbor who looks at that, is there added screening that you're going to be putting in to try to avoid some of that?
It's best because the people at home, there might not be many, or there may be 10, can't hear the responses that are given if you phrase your questions in such a way that they can answer all at once.
Yeah, so if you address us, and then they can answer whatever they can answer at the end.
Try to add that to my notes.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing is, yeah, I was wondering I know you guys said that there wouldn't be any lighting necessarily for the parking area, but I was curious now that you have such a long line of it in 2 areas, if you did have lighting, what that was going to look like. and what kind of screening you're going to do from the street angle, which you can answer later. I did want to bring up that western curb cut again. I thought it solved a lot of things. I hear you guys on it being too tight. I just wish we could look at that with fresh eyes and see if there's not something we can do to move something around to make it work. I also wanted to highlight that, like, I'm a little bit disappointed being your immediate neighbor right now because nobody did reach out to us, even though it was brought up last time that we'd be immediately impacted. It'd be really great to have a line of communication with you guys because I think it would be, I'm really excited for you to move into the neighborhood, and it'd be really nice if we just put this behind me so I don't have to keep reading your documents and writing long essays. The last thing I wanted to share is just a note about kind of the role that the church has. Like, I'm really thankful that you guys have come into the neighborhood and you're preserving this really beautiful structure. Pleasant Street is industrial, is one way of putting it. It's also very dense. It's, you know, it reflects all the different stages of Easthampton over time. I think everybody who lives on the street is really trying to improve it and make it better and get more green space and make it a little bit more livable. Preserving the church is something we're all thankful for, and it brings beauty and history. It's a building that was built with a lot of care. Well, what I see when I look at the development is really beautiful buildings that are maybe too close together and a little bit blocking the church off from the main road. Just if you can take a fresh look at it, not through the lens of business and ROIs, but just through the lens of, is this making the neighborhood a better place? I think it could go really far. I think the neighbors who appreciate that, they walk their dogs to the church, they teach their kids how to ride their bikes, they play under the crabapple tree that you guys are going to be removing. So I understand the economics of density, but slightly less density and slightly more consideration means better parking, added traffic safety, and a more harmonious relationship with the neighborhood compatibility. I personally would advocate for it. This project shouldn't just fit the parcel, it should fit our neighborhood. So that's what I'm asking for. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Any response to that, folks, or we don't have to, but
I mean, just a real quick thing. I mean, there's a lot of points there. I think one thing's worth mentioning is the parking that obviously comes up, but I feel the reality of what's going to happen is on-street parking. This is a private way, so the on-street parking is going to end up being on what's going to be considered Elizabeth Lane, the new street. That road's 22 foot wide, so I think if you're pulling up at Thanksgiving, what's going to happen is you're going to end up folks parked out of there, you know, in front of each house. I don't think people are going to be inclined to, you know, park on Prospect Street in the winter for Christmas and go through, you know, unplowed streets or whatever the case may be, or sidewalks. You're going to try to get as close to that. I think another thing, certainly if there's a request by the board to get an independent traffic study, we can make that happen. But we've done a lot of developments in the past and quite a few in town. What we've found in practicality is these get sold to all sorts of people. These are not particularly, they're not an over 55 community. It's not, you know, it's not workforce housing. This is going to be anybody from the, you know, single parent to perhaps retirees, work from home folks, to a family who has 2 kids, because they're going to be 2-bedroom units, things like that. So you're going to get a mix. And what we found is that, consider there be roughly 16 hours in a day where folks are coming and going kind of more commonly, the nighttime slower, that what happens in a development like this is really, it's every few minutes to, could be longer. You could go 20 minutes without a car coming in and out. It's very sporadic. We developed the 47 Cottage Street for a client in town that had, I believe, 30 something, roughly 30 units in that. Didn't have a ton of parking there, especially consider that the liquor store was sharing some of that. And, you know, I drive up and down Cottage Street more times than I care to admit, a dozen times or more a day to come and go. And I haven't seen that particular development has really caused a massive problem. And that actually has a very high usage. That particular building ended up being leased out to one particular tenant who put all students in there going to the same place at the same time, by and large. And I still have not gone up and down Cottage Street where that development has had a problem to where folks are causing a traffic jam and a major difference. I do get that over time. I mean, I was born in Easthampton, grew up, raised here, and never really left. My business has always been here. I've always tried to do projects that we take pride in. So this is another one of, I think we've tried to do the best we can with the parcel. I understand the, you know, put ROI aside, but we don't do it for fun. It is hopefully profitable for us, and there is math to that has to make sense. That is a challenge. You know, we are not a nonprofit. We feel that this is a really good project for the community. I don't know, Jeff, if we can pop into your email and maybe show us what we're doing that. But, you know, again, we take the concern seriously, but at the end of the day, I do think it's a good project. We are trying to take all this into consideration, but I think the reality of the impact of the community, based on other things we've seen, is hopefully minimal and substantially less than other uses for the property. So I just sent Jeff a couple documents.
And these were in the original package as well, but, yeah, just some of the views from,
yeah. So that's your, essentially the front on facade of the buildings. They all look pretty much the same. There's another one we have that has a larger rendering we can show you, but you particularly asked for the gable end. So yeah, so we'd like to show you what some of the gable ends will look like. So again, we tried to give everything a little character. You know, we do want to do a project that we're proud of in town. We're not guys from out of state that come in, slap something up, slap a jam, you're never going to see us again. You know, we spent a lot of time, and where the ROI kind of got pushed aside is in this, you know, making attractive looking buildings that we can all be proud of and add something to the community.
All right, thank you. Anybody else, comments or questions? Please.
Hello, I'm Molly Hale. I live in Florence, actually, at 96 Oak Street. And I learned about this project through the article in the Gazette about the last meeting. I may not need to say anything because now that I know that those chimneys are going to be retained, that was my concern. Because they're, well, the one of them, the tall one, is used as a roost for chimney sweeps, hundreds of them. And so I don't know if I should even bother saying anything. Would you like me to say what I was going to say?
I mean, we've got your letter that's in the record, but it sounds like that you're on the same page and it's going to be preserved. And
yeah,
we're at least anticipating a condition that would make sure that if anything was going to change with that they'd have to.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Talking about the homeowner agreement, that it would have something in there about not capping it without coming here with some good reason.
Yeah.
Thank
got
you.
it.
Thank
Okay.
you for
If anybody has any questions and wants to learn about chimney sweeps, you can ask me after the meeting.
the video is great. Thank you for sharing it.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you saw it.
Yeah, it's great.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Anybody online, Dylan?
Online, like to speak, please use the please use the raise hand function.
All right. So, we need to continue for a couple of reasons. One is at least wait for downtown, but also we have a few requests here. I think if you can get us that construction phasing stuff that you talked about, I think that would be helpful. And maybe either you or Dylan can send us the stormwater stuff that was submitted to Concom, so we have that. That might be helpful. There was going to be a check on the landscaping plan to make sure it was all native species. Maybe a proposal, a formal proposal for signage or something on that back slope, so we have something to look at. And then it sounds like there's a push for a traffic study. I mean, it can sort of go either way on this, but I'm totally fine if people are comfortable with it.
We should kind of go down the line and see what we.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, does anybody have a problem with asking for a traffic study? No.
No, I think we should do
Okay, so I mean, I think if that's something you guys are willing to do, I think that will go a long way towards.
so I guess just similar to the request before is, so I just want to understand the nature of the study and just the scope of the study. Is it looking at, you know, the same standards, same ITE numbers and analyzing it through, you know, their own eyes? Or is it doing actual traffic counts and all of that? Because that's the next level. I mean, that's an $8,000 study. And
I think we as a board have just made the decision, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we want to go to the next level. I think we're looking for the number of left turns, the number of right turns, the actual count. I think we're looking for a real traffic study. So I think
you're aware
that's what
that's
just happened.
That's an $8,000 or $10,000 study that's going to take months.
I get that, you know, that there's a burden that comes with it, but I think the board is asking for a real traffic study. And correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean,
I thought the ask was more of an independent look, which certainly is reasonable, but we feel the project of this size to have an independent multi-month traffic study, it seems a bit onerous compared to what we've seen other projects go through for this for 44 units or 42 units.
I'll jump in if that's okay.
Yeah,
Talk about my personal opinion is. I've actually been more in favor of something less because I personally do see this as for me, smaller density. I don't see it as huge density. I do think that there's a lot of growth in the city, and that we're coming close to a point where on more and more projects where in the past we haven't asked for traffic studies, that we're coming to a point as a community, just in terms of scale, that we're having to do that more often. For me on this, I would have been satisfied if I had a third-party independent review that looked at the data you provided and said yes or no, not something in your company. For me, that didn't cut it. So I would be willing to do that, but I'm hearing a lot from the public. I'm hearing from the board that we're dissatisfied. Personally, I think we're really close to that tripping point where we need the full study. And yes, I'm aware of the burden that's in it. So for me, you know, if I had a third party in there that could review what you said and put their name on it and their liability to it, that would be enough for me. I don't know.
I think that's fine for me. I don't.
I mean, I'm fine with an independent check as long as it was a detailed independent check that every single number was checked and verified. That's my biggest thing, because I don't know if it's true that there's these numbers. There's no basis for the numbers in this, really, to my understanding of it. Although I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't really understand how this all works. But yeah, it is a multi-month process because especially if we don't have any counts on Pleasant Street. I mean, if there's no available traffic counts for Pleasant Street, that's surprising to me, first of all, but I did check it and it's true. There isn't any that I could find. So we probably would need that to really understand what kind of impact is happening post-construction.
This is close. Real close to that.
It's the time frame, really. It
Yeah,
does
I would
take a
just
while.
say it is a massive setback for us, just in reality, just because of 580 construction that borders on pushing this to a next year project. I understand the ask.
And just to clarify a couple of the points that, you know, so we did look at traffic counts that were done on Pleasant Street in 2024. So that's, you know, that's the most recent data there. The next, you know, step, as I said, would be to go out and do actual traffic counts. I think what I would offer, just from my experience in doing these, is that those reports are really going to come down to clarifying the level of service in Pleasant Street, and those are graded between A and F. And to move it from B to C, or, you know, in those small increments, doesn't necessitate any road improvements from a traffic perspective. We went through this with River Valley Market and some of the other larger projects that, you know, those traffic volumes make these incremental shifts. Not until you get to the F stage do traffic, you know, enhancements or improvements become something that needs to be looked at.
Point that, you know, that is a good point, and it's really the root cause of my hesitation in this. Like I said, this is close, but at the end of the day, what you just stated was, look, what if we find that, you know, the street is rather jam-packed. It's not like you're gonna put a light outside of this project. There's not a lot of mitigation that can occur. It's either green light or not. And it's not like we're not gonna green light for this one particular reason, a residential at this density level. You know, I mean, there really is no requiring you to do it. There's not, if we don't like the results, there really is no, we're not going to stop it because of that, just because of the kind of project you have.
Well,
So-
we could decide to shrink it to generate less traffic.
And the comments about less housing, yeah, but then how much?
I mean, so what if we, looking towards a solution on the traffic study, what if we ask them to get an independent traffic engineer to come and not only verify the numbers, but also be available in our next meeting to answer questions in case we still have some skepticism about what that result is?
I like that, actually.
Does that seem doable for you? I mean, the idea that we could have somebody else that is trained in this world and could answer questions in case we still have some.
Do we have a list of consultants that we use traditionally that we could give them a couple of names?
I mean, it's gonna be all the same people that they
Same.
use too.
Okay.
I personally reach out to the same folks that have done some of the more recent studies. McMahon Associates have done a lot of the recent intersection studies for a lot of the projects and would certainly have more background on those than anybody.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that would be great. I think if they could sort of do their own fresh look at the numbers, and then also if you could, you know, they'd have somebody here so that we could ask questions if we need to. I think that would probably check that box. Reasonable. Derek?
Yeah, the individual who did the traffic study on that safety tops, he was really, really good.
I wonder if it was the same.
Yeah, it was a full-fledged study, obviously.
Yeah.
This is where I've been all along and what I wanted, so please don't come back to the next meeting with someone in-house.
Anything else that we need to get out in front of for the next meeting? I will just say, I mean, I've said this on other projects too, right? I mean, there's always math involved, right? This is not a hobby, this is your job, and I get that. I do think like the parking just looks like it's gonna be a nightmare. Now that is one where I'm saying like, I think that's largely gonna be a nightmare for people that live there right now, but there's definitely gonna be, you know, as someone who lives on the other side of town, but in a similar situation, like that overflows into other people's lives in a different way. I mean, if you come back and say this is as small as we can make it and that's life on the project, right? I understand that, but like, if there's a way to narrow some of this and add some parking, even at the cost of an expendable unit, again, that probably doesn't really exist, but I just think, you know, give us your best shot at that, because that I think could solve a lot of these potential problems that I think some people in the neighborhood will see. So that's just my 2 cents.
I want to add to that I definitely have seen it all along as being a potential issue, but the kind of project you have, I really find it compelling that the real solution is the expansion of the road. And to do that, you're really pulling out some housing in there, and I want the housing. I think the density is fine. So me personally, not thrilled with it, but I think it's acceptable, what you've got. I would be ready for it.
I mean, but it's a Thanksgiving and Christmas. Yes, you know, could it be a pain in the butt for the folks that live there? Yes, I wouldn't deny that, but I think your daily times, I think if you look at a lot of communities that have been built, things like Fox Run or such, if you look at the setbacks and if you actually put those as close to the road where you only could get 1 or 2 cars in the driveway, you end up with a very similar scenario.
Yeah.
There's going to be more challenging days than others, but I think by and large, you know, 360 days out of the year, you know, there's ample parking. And we also encourage people, I think people are going to single vehicle homes, and you know, we like that this is downtown, and hopefully folks use bikes and walk, and this is
I
a
mean,
great
that's the
location.
interesting part about all this, right? Is there's a push in a lot of modern zoning to eliminate parking requirements in general and try to then force people to not be as reliant on their cars to do it. So which we generally like in theory, and then when it's a specific project in front of us, we want the Walmart parking lot so that people can park there. One sec, we got one more speaker gonna come down.
Okay, I was just gonna make a suggestion. Could you eliminate the,
Can you do name and address up here just so we can get you on the record? Sorry.
yeah, no worries, sorry. You can just begin a turn. Dan Hayes, 15 Pleasant Street, ESP Auto. So, I guess since I'm here, I'll make a comment as well. I know you had mentioned that, people will be parking on that road. Is that right, Elizabeth?
It's not encouraged, it's not, you know, it's not striped, but I think the reality is if you went over your friend's house and they're having a couple people, they'll first take the spots right in front of the house. I think that's human nature.
Right. There won't be marked spots, and I don't think anyone will tell people to park there.
No.
I think that's
but I think they're gonna walk as little as humanly possible is most of our.
Right, but again, in terms of a planning aspect, if we understand human behavior and that's what they're gonna do, how does that impact emergency vehicles?
Yeah.
So.
It is a reality, but it's a private road. I mean, again, we can stripe it, but I think at the end of the day, the police can't ticket, they can't tow there.
Okay.
You know, I totally understand that.
So I do have a suggestion. I know that there was talk about that dumpster area and that you're gonna have the ability for pickup of recycling and waste. I think my personal thought is that having that dumpster area might be more of a problem and could you add more parking and eliminate that? Just a thought.
Yes, so that is a thought that we've approached that, but we find it more, the other problem with that is that on trash day, that the neighbors enjoy potentially 40 something trash cans out all along there. And then the second day, a recycling day all along there, and then a trash truck driving through there, all through there during the day. It's
But you're
kind
gonna
of 6
have
to
that
1,
anyhow.
half dozen the other.
You're gonna have that anyhow, because they're gonna have recycling. And
Well,
garbage
that
coming in.
helps because those particular ones, the intention is really just to serve the church users, because they don't have a garage. So
Okay.
that would then mean all those cans now become outdoor cans. You're adding, almost another 20 cans that are placed somewhere. So, yeah, we trust me, we put a lot of thought over.
I know you
over
have,
this.
and,
It's like,
and I think, I just want to reiterate, I think everybody appreciates the project, appreciates your work and your thought. And I'm not here to be, I'm just here to really
No, I
just
believe
offer
you.
a suggestion, but I'll say, think about that. And if there's another area for the church people to use something or to do something different, not only for the parking reason, but I think that other people are going to use that dumpster, and then you're going to have a problem with an overused dumpster. So you
It
don't have
definitely
to
creates, each unit has an area in it for the cans. So when you're a homeowner, in your garage is literally a recessed area that's enclosed for your cans. So I don't think they're going to be as inclined, again, human nature. I think they're going to put it there rather than walk all the way to the dumpster. But those dumpsters will be emptied pretty frequently, given that 9 units are going to use them probably a couple times a week. But yeah, we
Yeah, so it might be, I mean, I think to his suggestion, it might be worth at this point, all those options you looked at where you can do something or you can maximize more parking, it might be worth it to at least see what that looks like.
Yeah, we'll take
But,
a.
and I know you're,
but
obviously you want to have plenty of parking for your customers too.
I was gonna say, at the end of the day, nobody wants a better development than us because it's more saleable. We ideally want ample parking to feel everybody comfortable. We want a good looking unit.
And sometimes we say that's fine, that's gonna be sort of a business problem for the applicant, and sometimes it's a place where you say, okay, but some of this is gonna overflow and impact neighbors, so, then we have a little more of an obligation to be concerned about that, but I think we're on the same page, at least this identifying.
appreciate you being here and listening, and for all of your really good insight and questions. So thank you all.
Thank you. One more, please, come.
I heard a request for Dylan to send you guys the stormwater plan. It's not posted anywhere on the site, so I'd like to see it too.
Oh, yeah, then we can just post that on the planning board page too.
And I don't see anywhere in the development papers a sewer plan.
There was the utility plan was the blue and yellow one on those drawings.
Yeah, that should be posted to the website.
Okay, I'll look again. And I'll follow up with the DPW about the age of those pipes, because that's the big concern for me. That's on Pleasant Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you guys need for a timeline to do this? And also, what do we know when your next Concom meeting is? And since that's part of what we're waiting for too.
I think it's the 30th.
Okay.
We'll be ready for the next meeting after.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
we're in July then.
And I guess we probably can't ask you what you think the timeline is for a decision on Concom, because you guys don't know either. So, but how long do you think you folks will need for the traffic, the construction? I mean, most of these other things I think are probably low hanging fruit, but yeah.
I would certainly have a better sense of traffic. I think that would be the longest lead. I can start making calls tomorrow and see who might be available. If, I think knowing that we don't need counts and, that is big. So hopefully they will have time to squeeze.
So does it make sense to go out to like July 15th? That's gonna be like 4 weeks.
Ideally, if we could do that, the first July, I think we could shoot for that. If you could give us we continue it to then, and if we need an extra.
Yeah, I mean,
to bump it,
the thing is, we're probably gonna have to continue it past that. And normally I would say I don't want to do it too soon because I hate having people come out and then we tell them to go home. But I think there's things we can address on the first. And I also think we won't be able to vote on the first unless Concom has done theirs already too. But who
I mean,
knows?
based on the conversations, I'm optimistic that that's gonna be straightforward. Talk to the engineer and such, and they visit the site now, who knows, but hopefully they leave the 30th with that resolved.
Okay.
May I ask one question? Could you clarify what, I might have missed it, what you need in terms of phasing?
I think we had some questions about construction phasing, the actual, I mean, I know
Can
you.
we address that, or, because, I mean, I think we have whatever you need there, but I just wanna.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd sort of talked about it generally, but I think there was,
Well, so they had phase 1A, 1A and 2, but they didn't necessarily give timeframes. Is that really what the question was? I'm not sure what the question was either.
Yes, I'm not sure what that.
Okay.
There's a phasing plan as
I've
part of
seen
the
the
package.
phasing plan. I guess if we get there and we can more.
I mean, as far as timeline, it, quite honestly, it's dependent on sales. I mean, the main units and the phase 1 and the church are gonna be essentially one and the same. These units will begin first, the first 11 will follow the church and start just purely because of plans. Phases, essentially 3 and 4 are really, quite honestly,
Depends on what happens with the first one. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that sounds good. All right, so why don't we continue this to July 1st, Tom?
I motion to continue the special permit for King Courier, for the existing church on 35 Pleasant Street to July 1st.
Seconded.
We'll continue to July 1st. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
See you back here in a few weeks.
Just so I have this, outstanding as well, independent traffic analysis, you want to see what has been submitted to the Concom, and you're also interested in looking at potential HOA conditions.
Well, I think we'll deal with that internally. Like, I don't think we need materials from them on that. And, but we were talking about a signage plan from them and confirming native species. Signage plan is just that fact. All right. Please, nothing to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.